The story so far is this. Has your trust ever been shattered by someone you thought you knew inside and out? That's exactly the dilemma I found myself in when I caught my husband lying about a simple night out with his friends. It seemed innocent enough at first. A routine part of married life, right? But when those small inconsistencies started to pile up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. How could a seemingly harmless lie unravel everything we've built together? Here's how one unexpected discovery turned my world upside down and left me questioning everything. I'm a 34-year-old woman married to my husband Tom for the past 8 years. We met in college and have been inseparable ever since. Or so I thought. I work as a marketing consultant while Tom is an architect. Our life together, at least on the surface, has been nothing short of fulfilling. We have a cozy home, no kids yet by choice, and a circle of friends who we've known for ages. We've always prided ourselves on our open communication, which is why this situation has thrown me for a loop. The trouble began a few months ago, and it seemed inconsequential at first. Tom mentioned going out with his friends, a regular occurrence that didn't raise any red flags. However, I started noticing little things. A subtle shift in his demeanor, vague details about his outings, and a noticeable lack of enthusiasm when recounting his time with his friends. Initially, I brushed these off, attributing them to stress at work or perhaps just needing some guy time. But as these inconsistencies started to build, an unsettling feeling settled in my gut. I began questioning myself. Was I being paranoid? Was I imagining things? I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that the man I trusted implicitly was simply going through a phase. Yet that nagging doubt persisted, making me feel both anxious and confused. The more I tried to rationalize his behavior, the more I felt like I was standing on shaky ground, struggling to maintain my balance in a relationship that suddenly felt unfamiliar. As the weeks turned into months, the uneasy feeling only grew stronger. Tom's outings became more frequent, and the excuses more elaborate. It wasn't just the frequency, but the subtle changes that were impossible to ignore. He'd always been meticulous with his phone, but now it rarely left his side. His laughter, once easy and genuine, seemed forced when he recounted his nights out. I found myself in a constant state of hyper-awareness, scrutinizing every detail for signs of something amiss. The first major curveball came one Friday evening. I was working late on a project when I received a call from one of Tom's friends, asking if we were still on for dinner. Confused, I mentioned that Tom had said he was out with him and their group of friends. There was an awkward pause before his friend clarified that they hadn't seen Tom in weeks. My heart sank. It felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled, and I was free-falling into an abyss of uncertainty. This revelation left me reeling. The certainty that something was wrong hit me with full force. I felt a mix of betrayal and fear, each emotion amplifying the other. I wanted answers, but was terrified of what they might be. The idea of confronting Tom filled me with dread, as if by doing so, I'd make the situation irrevocably real. In the days that followed, I was consumed by an internal battle. Should I confront him? Should I dig deeper or let it go, hoping it would resolve itself? My mind was a whirlwind of what-ifs, and my heart was heavy with the weight of unspoken fears. I was scared of the confrontation, scared of the potential fallout, and most of all, scared of losing the man I loved. I began noticing other changes. Tom was more withdrawn, spending hours in his home office with the door closed. Conversations felt superficial, a stark contrast to the deep, meaningful discussions we used to share. The emotional distance between us was palpable, and I felt isolated in my own home. The stress was taking its toll on me physically and emotionally. I was constantly on edge, my mind racing with scenarios of what might be happening. Sleep became elusive, and I found myself questioning every decision, every word exchanged. The more I tried to hold things together, the more they seemed to slip through my fingers. It was a painful realization that the life I thought I knew was unraveling before my eyes, and I was powerless to stop it. The complexity of the issue felt insurmountable, and with each passing day, the knot in my stomach tightened, a constant reminder of the fragile state of my marriage. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I knew I needed to approach this carefully. Confronting Tom directly felt too abrupt, so I decided to start by gathering my thoughts and seeking advice from someone I trusted. I reached out to my best friend, Sarah, who has always been my rock. Over coffee, I laid everything out: the inconsistencies, the phone call, and my growing fears. Sarah listened intently, offering a mix of empathy and practical advice. Her suggestion was simple yet daunting: talk to Tom openly and honestly. She reminded me that communication had always been the foundation of our relationship. I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Tom was terrifying. What if he shut me out? Or worse, what if he admitted to something I couldn't handle? Before approaching him, I tried to create a more supportive environment at home, hoping it would encourage Tom to open up. I planned more time together: dinners at home, weekend walks, anything to rekindle the connection that felt lost. But each attempt was met with polite but distant participation from Tom. It was as if there was an invisible wall between us, one that my efforts couldn't penetrate. Despite my fears, I finally decided to talk to him. One evening after dinner, I gently broached the topic, expressing my concerns without accusation. I shared my observations and how they made me feel, hoping vulnerability would bridge the gap between us. Tom listened quietly, his expression unreadable. Then came the second curveball. Just as it seemed like we might have a breakthrough, Tom received a call from work. A project deadline had suddenly moved up, demanding all his attention. Our conversation was cut short, leaving the issues unresolved and hanging over us like a dark cloud. The work crisis added another layer of stress, making communication even more difficult. I felt deflated, my hopes of resolution dashed. With Tom now more engrossed in work, my attempts to reach out were met with exhaustion and distraction. It felt like our lives were running parallel, never intersecting. The obstacles seemed insurmountable, and I was left feeling more alone than ever, struggling to hold on to the remnants of our relationship while life continued to throw us off course. The constant turmoil in my marriage had begun to seep into every aspect of my life, casting a shadow over my daily existence. Emotionally, I was caught in a relentless cycle of confusion, frustration, and sadness. I found myself questioning everything: my judgment, my worth, and even my ability to maintain a relationship I once thought was unbreakable. The emotional weight of the situation was taking a toll on my mental health. I was constantly anxious, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be happening behind the scenes. The stress was palpable, manifesting in sleepless nights and a loss of appetite. I felt like I was on a never-ending treadmill, trying to keep up with the demands of life while my heart and mind were elsewhere. Socially, I became more withdrawn. The once vibrant and outgoing person my friends knew was now a shadow of her former self. I declined invitations, unable to face the questions about how things were going at home. Even when I did muster the courage to socialize, I felt like an outsider, unable to engage in conversations that seemed trivial compared to the storm brewing in my personal life. At work, my performance started to slip. Projects that once excited me now felt burdensome, and I struggled to focus. My colleagues noticed the change, offering concern and support, but I couldn't bring myself to share the true extent of my troubles. It felt as though I was living two lives, one that appeared put together on the outside, and another that was unraveling internally. The internal conflict was perhaps the most draining aspect of all. I was torn between the love I still felt for Tom and the reality of our current situation. Part of me longed to fight for what we had, while another part wanted to protect myself from further pain. The uncertainty of it all was overwhelming, and I often found myself in tears, grappling with the fear that our marriage might not survive this ordeal. Despite everything, a glimmer of hope remained, a hope that we could somehow navigate this storm together. But as the days wore on and the silence between us grew louder, that hope was increasingly difficult to hold on to. It was a painful limbo, a place of neither resolution nor acceptance, leaving me questioning how much longer I could endure this emotional roller coaster. After months of trying to hold everything together, I found myself at a crossroads, contemplating options I never thought I'd have to consider. Despite my efforts to communicate and bridge the gap between Tom and me, it felt as though we were drifting further apart with each passing day. The situation had reached a point where the status quo was no longer sustainable, and I was forced to confront the possibility of taking more drastic measures. The thought of a separation loomed heavily in my mind. It was a decision fraught with uncertainty, not only for the emotional upheaval it would cause, but also for the practical implications. Where would I go? How would we divide our lives that had been so intricately woven together? The very idea of unraveling 8 years of marriage was daunting and filled me with dread. Yet as much as I feared the prospect of separation, I couldn't ignore the toll that our unresolved issues were taking on my well-being. I worried about what others would think, how our friends and family might react to the news. the social stigma of a failed marriage weighed on me heavily, making the decision even more complex. I was torn between the love I still harbored for Tom and the pressing need to protect myself from further emotional harm. The fear of the unknown was paralyzing, but so was the thought of continuing to live in a state of perpetual uncertainty and unhappiness. I began to explore the possibility of a trial separation, a way to give us both space to reflect on our relationship and what we truly wanted for the future. But even this temporary measure felt like a leap into the abyss. Would it bring clarity, or would it be the beginning of the end? As I grappled with these decisions, I felt a profound sense of loneliness, unsure of what the future held. The path ahead was unclear, and I was left to navigate this emotional labyrinth with only my instincts and the hope that somehow I'd find my way through. As I stand at this crossroads, looking back at the journey of the past few months, I'm overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions. There's a sense of exhaustion from trying to make sense of the chaos that has engulfed my marriage, yet there's also a lingering hope that perhaps, somehow, things can change for the better. I've navigated through fear, confusion, and a profound loneliness, each step more daunting than the last. Now, I turn to this community seeking guidance from those who might have walked a similar path. How did you find clarity in such murky waters? Were there signs or solutions you discovered that helped you through a similar crisis? I'm reaching out in the hope that your insights might offer me a glimmer of light in this dark tunnel. At this moment, I'm contemplating a trial separation, unsure if it's the right choice or merely a temporary escape. I worry about the repercussions, but I also yearn for peace and clarity, something I haven't felt in far too long. While I'm open to any advice or shared experiences, I also acknowledge that this might be more about expressing my feelings than finding immediate solutions. If nothing else, sharing my story here has provided a small sense of relief. Knowing that I'm not entirely alone in this struggle brings a measure of comfort. So, if you have any thoughts, I'd truly appreciate hearing them as I navigate this difficult chapter of my life. TLDR, I'm a 34-year-old woman who caught my husband lying about going out. Despite efforts to communicate, our marriage is strained, considering a trial separation, seeking advice.